Cassandra Mitchell, 32, receives a formal letter from her father disinviting her from the annual family reunion. The letter mentions her disgraceful behavior that would embarrass the family. She simply texts back, "Understood," while sitting in her apartment surrounded by evidence. "I've been investigating my father's financial crimes for 3 years. The reunion will still happen, just not how they expect. My family doesn't know I'm about to expose everything they've hidden for decades." I wonder where you're watching this from today. Is it somewhere quiet where you can really absorb this family drama that's about to unfold? If you've ever felt betrayed by someone who is supposed to protect you, you might want to subscribe to hear how I turned my family's rejection into the ultimate justice served. This story changed my entire understanding of blood loyalty, and it might change yours too. Let's dive into how it all began. I grew up in the prestigious Mitchell family, known throughout Boston for our successful real estate business, Mitchell Properties. To understand why my father's letter hurt so much despite expecting it, you need to know what it was like growing up as the middle child in the Mitchell household. My father, Harold Mitchell, built his business from scratch, or so he claimed. He valued appearance and family legacy above all else. Every decision, from the clothes we wore to the schools we attended, was calculated to enhance the Mitchell name. Our family portraits adorned the walls of his downtown office, presenting the image of the perfect American success story. My older brother Ryan was the golden child who could do no wrong. From the moment he was born, my father groomed him to take over the family business. Ryan had my father's charisma and charm, making it easy for him to win over clients and partners. Even when he crashed his brand new BMW at 16, while drinking, I might add, my father laughed it off as boys being boys and bought him another one the next week. My younger sister Amanda was the perfect daughter. Beautiful, obedient, and always eager to please, she married into the Westbrook family at 24, another wealthy Boston dynasty. Her wedding was featured in Boston Magazine, with my father beaming proudly in every photo. She never questioned anything, which made her my father's ideal daughter. Then there was me, Cassandra the black sheep. Instead of following the path laid out for me, I chose to become a forensic accountant. My father couldn't understand why I would waste my time counting other people's money when I could be helping to build the Mitchell empire. What he really meant was, why would I choose a profession dedicated to finding financial irregularities when I should be helping hide them? Growing up, our family dinners were exercises in psychological warfare. My father would ask each of us about our day, praising Ryan's most minor achievements while dismissing mine. "Ryan closed the Hanover deal today," he would announce proudly. 7 figures. That's how it's done. Then he would turn to me. "And how was your day, Cassandra?" Still playing with calculators. Our family wealth was on constant display. We lived in a sprawling colonial mansion in Beacon Hill with 7 bedrooms, a pool, and a separate guest house. My mother redecorated every 3 years, whether the house needed it or not. We hosted charity events that were really just excuses to show off our wealth while appearing philanthropic. My father knew everyone who mattered in Boston, judges, politicians, business leaders, and never hesitated to name drop. My mother, Eleanor, was a former debutante who married my father when she was 22. She managed the house, organized social events, and never, ever contradicted my father. When he would berate me for my career choices, she would sit silently, occasionally saying, "Your father only wants what's best for you, dear." She was the ultimate enabler, pretending not to see the cracks in our family's foundation. I remember one specific incident when I was 14. I overheard my father on the phone talking about moving the Anderson money before the audit. When I innocently asked him about it at dinner, his face turned dark red. "Never speak about business matters you don't understand," he hissed. I was sent to my room without dinner and grounded for a week. That was the first time I clearly understood that questions were dangerous in our household. The annual Mitchell family reunion was the crown jewel of my father's social calendar. It wasn't just for family, it was a showcase of Mitchell success. Clients, business partners, and influential community members were invited to our estate to witness the Mitchell prosperity and hopefully bring more business our way. It was a carefully orchestrated performance, with each family member playing their assigned role. As I grew older and learned more about finance, little things started to nag at me. How could our business grow so quickly during market downturns? Why did my father have so many overseas trips to countries known for banking secrecy? Why were certain client files locked away where only he and Ryan could access them? I started to suspect that the Mitchell fortune might not be as legitimate as we all pretended. But even with my suspicions, I never imagined how deep the deception went or that I would one day be exiled from the family I had always struggled to please. The letter wasn't just a disinvitation. It was the culmination of a lifetime of being the odd one out, the one who asked too many questions, the one who couldn't just play along. The irony was that by trying to shut me out, my father had finally freed me to do what was right. If you've ever been the family black sheep, you know that strange mix of pain and pride. The pain of rejection and the pride of standing by your principles even when it costs you. Little did my family know that their rejection would be the catalyst for their downfall. The path that led to my father's letter began 3 years ago, during what should have been a routine family obligation. My mother had been diagnosed with early-stage breast cancer. She's in remission now, and Ryan was too busy to help organize her medical paperwork. Amanda was on a 6-week European vacation with her husband, conveniently unreachable. So the task fell to me, the responsible middle child. While sorting through my mother's files in my father's home office, accidentally opened a folder labeled Jenkins Holdings. I wasn't snooping. The folder was mixed in with my mother's insurance documents. Inside, I found a series of transactions that made no sense. Large sums moving from an account belonging to Margaret Jenkins into several offshore accounts, then filtering back into Mitchell Properties through a maze of shell companies. Margaret Jenkins. The name sounded familiar, and after a moment I remembered her, a widow in her 70s who had been at our Christmas party the previous year. My father had introduced her as a valued client and had been extraordinarily attentive to her all evening. I made copies of the documents and put everything back exactly as I found it. That night, I couldn't sleep. The next day, I casually mentioned Mrs. Jenkins to Ryan over coffee, asking if she was still a client. Jenkins. Ryan laughed. That old lady was a goldmine. Dad, and I convinced her to invest her entire portfolio with us. Husband left her insurance money. No financial sense whatsoever. Perfect client. The way he said perfect client, like she was a target rather than a person, made my stomach turn. But I forced a smile and changed the subject. Over the next few weeks, I quietly reviewed the Jenkins documents. With my background in forensic accounting, I could see what an ordinary person might miss. Mrs. Jenkins' funds hadn't been invested. They had been systematically drained through excessive fees, unnecessary transactions, and outright theft. I found myself parked outside Margaret Jenkins' modest home in Dorchester one Tuesday afternoon. I hadn't planned to visit her, but something pushed me to understand the human cost of what I suspected. She invited me in for tea, assuming I was there on behalf of Mitchell Properties. Her living room was sparsely furnished. A single photo of a man I assumed was her late husband sat on an old TV stand. As she served me tea in a chipped cup, she mentioned she had been meaning to call my father. The heating bill was so high this winter, she said. I was hoping some of my investments might have matured by now. Your father said I would see returns by spring. My chest tightened as I realized she was struggling financially while my family lived in luxury. I asked gentle questions about her investments with Mitchell Properties, and the picture became clearer with each answer. Mrs. Jenkins had entrusted her entire life savings, nearly $1.2 million from her husband's life insurance, to my father, who had promised her guaranteed returns and financial security. Your father has been so good to me, she said. Like a son, really. He calls to check on me sometimes. Says the market is just having a temporary downturn, but my money is safe. I left Mrs. Jenkins' house feeling physically ill. Back at my apartment, I spread out the documents and traced the money. There was no temporary downturn. Her money was gone, siphoned away to fund the Mitchell lifestyle. And Mrs. Jenkins wasn't the only victim. The same pattern appeared with other clients, many of them elderly or financially unsophisticated. I faced the most difficult ethical dilemma of my life. Do I turn in my own family? Do I destroy the Mitchell name and everything my father had built? Or do I become complicit through my silence? I decided on a third option. I would gather irrefutable evidence while maintaining the appearance of family harmony. If I was going to take down my own family, I needed to be absolutely certain and thoroughly prepared. For months, I maintained a careful facade. I attended family dinners, made small talk at business functions, and never let on what I knew. Meanwhile, I methodically gathered evidence of decades of fraud. As my investigation deepened, I noticed Ryan and my father watching me more closely. Had I slipped up? Did they suspect something? One evening, Ryan stopped by my apartment unannounced. "Dad's concerned about you, Cass," he said, glancing around my living room as if searching for something. "You've been asking a lot of questions about client accounts. That's not really your department, is it?" I shrugged. "Just professional curiosity. Occupational hazard of being an accountant." He didn't seem convinced. A week later, Amanda called. "You need to stop whatever you're doing," she said without preamble. "Family comes first, Cassandra. Always." "I don't know what you're talking about," I replied calmly. "Yes, you do. Ryan told me you've been asking questions. Don't bite the hand that feeds you." After I hung up, I wondered if Amanda knew about the fraud or if she was just parroting family loyalty talking points. Either way, I needed to be more careful. Then came the anonymous tip. A manila envelope delivered to my office with no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Check Mitchell Properties client accounts from 2005 to 2010. Focus on deceased clients with no living relatives. It wasn't signed, but I recognized my cousin Derek's handwriting. He had worked briefly for the company before being abruptly let go after asking too many questions about accounting practices. That tip led me to the darkest discovery yet. My father had a special category of clients, elderly people with substantial assets and minimal family connections. Once these clients died, their accounts were falsified to show withdrawals or losses that never occurred, with the funds instead going to Mitchell family accounts. I sat in my apartment that night surrounded by evidence of decades of fraud and realized a devastating truth. My entire childhood, the private schools, the vacations, the beautiful home, had all been funded by stolen money. My father wasn't a brilliant businessman. He was a thief who preyed on the vulnerable. And Ryan wasn't just following in his footsteps. He was perfecting the system. That was the moment I decided my family needed to face justice, no matter the personal cost to me. I had spent my life seeking their approval, but now I understood that their approval wasn't worth having. I didn't want to be a Mitchell anymore. You know that feeling when something you've believed your whole life suddenly crumbles? That moment when you realize the story you've been told about your family is a complete lie? If you've ever discovered a family secret that changed everything, drop a comment below. I was about to learn that exposing the truth would cost me my family. But in the end, maybe that wasn't such a high price after all. With my decision made, I transformed my apartment into a command center for what became a 3-year covert investigation into my own family. The irony wasn't lost on me. My father had always dismissed my career, yet the skills I developed as a forensic accountant would ultimately be his undoing. I created an elaborate system to organize the evidence. My spare bedroom became an office with a specialized computer setup disconnected from the internet to prevent hacking. I installed a hidden safe behind a false panel in my closet to store physical documents. Every night after work, I would add to my growing collection of evidence, meticulously cross-referencing and categorizing each piece. My position at Delaney Financial Forensics gave me access to resources and expertise that proved invaluable. I could consult databases and run analyses without raising suspicions. After all, it was literally my job to investigate financial crimes. What I uncovered went far beyond what I had initially suspected. The Mitchell family business wasn't just occasionally cutting corners or making aggressive investments. It was a sophisticated criminal enterprise operating under the veneer of a legitimate real estate company. The crimes were numerous and varied. Money laundering through property flips and fake renovations. Embezzlement from client accounts. Tax fraud through a network of shell companies. Ponzi schemes targeting elderly investors. The more I dug, the worse it got. I documented specific transactions in excruciating detail. The Peterson account, $840,000 stolen over 3 years through falsified investment reports. The Delaney property, purchased for $3.2 million with laundered money, then sold to a shell company for $5.7 million to legitimize the funds. The Roberts Trust, completely emptied after Mr. Roberts died, with falsified paperwork showing the money had been withdrawn before his death. Throughout this process, my colleague Jamie Washington became my only confidant. I couldn't risk telling anyone else, but I needed someone to know what I was doing in case something happened to me. Jamie was not only a brilliant financial investigator, but also the only person I trusted completely. "You realize what you're doing, right?" Jamie said one night as we reviewed documents in my apartment. "If you're wrong, you've thrown away your relationship with your family for nothing. And if you're right, you're sending your father and brother to prison." "I know," I said quietly. "But what choice do I have? These people lost everything. Mrs. Jenkins can barely afford to heat her home." Jamie squeezed my shoulder. "Just be careful. People like your father don't go down easily." There were several close calls during my investigation. Once, while copying documents from my father's home office during a family dinner, Ryan nearly caught me. I heard his footsteps coming down the hall and barely managed to slip the papers back into the file cabinet and pretend I was looking for aspirin in the desk drawer. "What are you doing in here?" Ryan asked, his eyes narrowing. "Headache," I replied, holding up the aspirin bottle I'd fortunately found. "Mom said I could grab these from Dad's desk." He studied me for a moment. "Dinner's getting cold." Another time, I noticed my father's private investigator, Frank Donovan, parked outside my apartment building. I had anticipated surveillance at some point and had been careful to establish a boring, predictable routine. For 2 weeks, I did nothing related to the investigation while Frank watched me until he apparently decided I wasn't up to anything suspicious. The psychological toll of living this double life was immense. I developed insomnia, lost weight, and jumped at unexpected noises. Every family gathering became an exercise in acting, smiling through gritted teeth while knowing what they had done. I would sit across from my father at Sunday dinners, making small talk while carrying evidence that could send him to prison for decades. During this time, I learned that my mother was not as innocent as I had hoped. At first, I thought she might be another victim, kept in the dark about the source of our family's wealth. But during my investigation, I found emails where my father clearly discussed aspects of the fraud, and my mother responded with suggestions to better cover their tracks. "Eleanor, we need to move the Johnson money before the audit," my father had written. "Use the Cayman account," she replied. "And remember to invite the Johnsons to the benefit next month. They're less likely to ask questions if they feel included." This discovery hurt almost more than learning about my father's crimes. My mother, who had taught me about honesty and integrity, was an active participant in the fraud. I also uncovered evidence that Amanda's husband, Peter Westbrook, was involved. His investment firm had helped launder money through a series of property developments. In exchange, my father had provided capital for Peter's business ventures and introduced him to wealthy clients. Perhaps the most surprising discovery was that Ryan had been embezzling from the family business itself. Not content with his share of the ill-gotten gains, he had set up his own scheme to skim money from company accounts. He was stealing from our father, who was stealing from clients. Honor among thieves, indeed. As my evidence mounted, I began to identify patterns in how my family selected victims. They targeted people who were vulnerable but affluent. Elderly widows and widowers, busy professionals with inherited wealth but limited financial knowledge, recent immigrants with language barriers but successful businesses. They looked for people who would trust them implicitly and who lacked the expertise to question their financial statements. I made it my mission to understand these victims as people, not just entries in a ledger. I accidentally ran into several of them at coffee shops or community events. I befriended them, not revealing my identity, just listening to their stories. Mrs. Jenkins talked about canceling her annual trip to visit her sister in Florida because investments were down. Mr. Abernathy mentioned selling his beloved classic car collection because the market hasn't performed as expected. Ms. Liu explained how she had to postpone her retirement because the property development is taking longer than anticipated. Each story strengthened my resolve. These weren't just financial crimes. They were deeply personal betrayals that had altered the course of people's lives. By the end of the third year, I had compiled over 2,000 pages of evidence documenting decades of financial crimes. I had bank records, transaction histories, falsified documents, email exchanges, recorded conversations, legal in Massachusetts with one-party consent, and witness statements from former employees who had left the company after becoming uncomfortable with its practices. I knew I had enough to go to the authorities. What I didn't know was that my family had begun to put together the pieces as well, and they were about to make a desperate move to silence me. 2 weeks before I received my father's letter, the Mitchell family gathered for a monthly dinner at my parents' home. These dinners were mandatory. My father's way of maintaining the illusion of family unity. That night, the conversation revolved around an upcoming deal with Riverside Developments, a new client with substantial assets. "We should structure it like the Hartwell account," Ryan suggested, swirling his scotch. That worked out nicely. I should have just nodded and smiled as I usually did during business talk. But something about Ryan's smug expression triggered me. The Hartwell account had been particularly egregious. An elderly man with dementia whose entire estate had been systematically plundered. Is Riverside being handled by the Boston office or the Cayman one? I asked innocently, referring to the offshore entity I had discovered was used to hide stolen funds. The room went silent. My mother's fork clattered against her plate. Ryan's eyes narrowed to slits, and my father's face flushed dark red. "What exactly do you mean by that, Cassandra?" my father asked, his voice dangerously quiet. I realized my mistake immediately. In my fatigue and frustration, I had revealed knowledge I shouldn't have had. I attempted to backpedal. "Just something I heard Ryan mention on the phone once," I said with a forced laugh. "I don't really understand all the business jargon." The tension in the room eased slightly, but I could feel their eyes on me throughout the rest of dinner. The damage was done. I had tipped my hand. The next day, while leaving my office, I spotted Ryan's black Mercedes idling across the street. He wasn't even trying to be subtle anymore. I walked normally to the subway, but instead of going home, I went to Jamie's apartment. "They're watching me," I told Jamie. "I made a mistake." Jamie checked the security of my evidence backup and helped me create a contingency plan. "You might need to accelerate your timeline," she advised. "If they suspect what you're doing, they won't hesitate to destroy evidence." She was right, but I wasn't quite ready. I needed to secure a few more documents to make the case airtight. I decided to be extra cautious for the next few days while finalizing my evidence collection. 3 days after the dinner, I received a call from Amanda. This was unusual. We typically communicated through text, maintaining a polite but distant relationship. "Cassie," she said, using the childhood nickname I'd always hated, "you know family loyalty is everything, right?" "Of course," I replied cautiously. "Good. Because sometimes people get confused about where their loyalty should lie. They forget that blood is thicker than water." "Is there something specific you want to tell me, Amanda?" "Just that actions have consequences. Especially actions against family." She hung up without saying goodbye. The threat was clear. I doubled my security measures, moving my most crucial evidence to a safety deposit box under Jamie's name. The following weekend, I returned from grocery shopping to find something off about my apartment. Nothing was visibly disturbed, but as someone who lived alone, I could sense that someone had been there. The air felt different. A book on my coffee table was aligned differently. The bathroom hand towel was folded the way my mother always folded towels, corners precisely matched. I did a careful sweep and discovered small signs of intrusion. My laptop had been moved slightly. A drawer that I always left partially open was fully closed. I checked my hidden evidence and found it untouched. They hadn't discovered my secret compartments. But when I turned on my computer, I could tell it had been accessed. The folder arrangement was subtly different. Fortunately, I kept nothing incriminating on my regular computer. It was a decoy, with my real work conducted on a separate laptop hidden in a ventilation panel. Still, the invasion of my home left me shaken. They were getting desperate. 3 days later, I received an unexpected call from my father. "Cassandra, I've been thinking about your career," he began without preamble. "You've developed some valuable skills at that forensic firm. We could use someone with your expertise at Mitchell Properties." This was unprecedented. My father had never shown interest in my career, let alone suggested I join the family business. "I'm offering you a position as compliance director," he continued. "Starting salary of $200,000 plus bonuses. Your own office in the headquarters. Company car." I almost laughed at the transparency of the bribe. "Why the sudden interest in my skills, Dad?" "I've always valued your abilities, Cassandra. Perhaps I haven't expressed that clearly enough." "And what exactly would my duties include?" "Ensuring we're following all regulations. Reviewing our accounting practices. Reporting directly to me, of course."
He wanted me where he could watch me.
Controlled.
Contained.
"I appreciate the offer," I said. "Let me think about it." "Don't think too long. The position needs to be filled quickly." After hanging up, I called Jamie. "They're trying to buy me off. They definitely know something." "Be careful," Jamie warned. "If bribing you doesn't work, they might try more aggressive tactics." Jamie's warning proved prophetic. 2 days later, the formal letter arrived at my apartment. Expensive cream stationery with a Mitchell Properties letterhead, my father's bold signature at the bottom. "Dear Cassandra," it read. "After careful consideration, the family has decided it would be best if you did not attend this year's reunion. Your recent behavior and apparent interest in confidential business matters has raised concerns. Your presence would create tension and potentially embarrass the family during an important event. Please respect our wishes in this matter and do not attempt to attend. Sincerely, Harold Mitchell." I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the letter. Despite anticipating some kind of move against me, the formal rejection stung more than I expected. This was my father officially cutting me off from the family, the nuclear option. I took a deep breath and sent a simple text to my father's cell phone. "Understood." That single word contained multitudes. Yes, I understood I was no longer welcome. Yes, I understood they were afraid of what I knew. Yes, I understood this was their last warning before taking more drastic measures. And most importantly, yes, I understood exactly what needed to be done now. I immediately called Jamie. "It's time. They've officially disinvited me from the family reunion. Are you okay?" Jamie asked. "Actually, yes," I replied, surprised to find it was true. "They've made my decision much easier." That night, I finalized my evidence compilation and prepared everything for the authorities. I had planned to report them after the reunion, but their actions forced me to accelerate my timeline. However, a new plan was forming in my mind, one that would bring justice in a more poetic way. The annual Mitchell family reunion was in 2 weeks. Despite the letter, I would be there. Not as the dutiful daughter seeking approval, but as the harbinger of justice they never saw coming. I think we all reach that point in our lives where we have to make a choice between what's comfortable and what's right. Have you ever had to make a difficult decision that you knew would change everything? Let me know in the comments, because sometimes knowing others have faced similar crossroads makes our own journey a little less lonely. Now, let me tell you exactly how I plan to crash that family reunion. With the reunion just 2 weeks away, I shifted into high gear. If I was going to destroy my family's criminal enterprise, I needed a plan that was both legally sound and impossible to derail. This wasn't just about revenge, it was about justice for the victims and accountability for the perpetrators. My first step was contacting the proper authorities. I had spent months researching which agencies would be most effective in handling this case. The crimes crossed multiple jurisdictions and involved various types of fraud, so I needed a coordinated approach. I reached out to Special Agent Diana Reynolds at the FBI's Financial Crimes Division, whom I had met at a professional conference the previous year. We arranged to meet at a coffee shop far from my usual haunts. "This is extraordinary," Agent Reynolds said, leafing through the sample documents I had brought. "You've basically done our job for us." How long have you been gathering this evidence? 3 years, I replied. And there's much more. You understand what this means? She asked, studying my face carefully. These are serious charges against your own family. I understand completely. They've stolen over $40 million from vulnerable people. They deserve to face the consequences. We discussed timing. Ideally, I wanted the arrest to happen at the reunion itself, when all the key players would be present. Agent Reynolds was skeptical at first. We don't typically schedule arrests for dramatic effect, Ms. Mitchell. It's not about drama, I explained. The reunion will have all the major players in one place: my father, Ryan, Amanda's husband Peter, and several associates involved in the scheme. Plus, many of the victims will be there as guests. Victims will be at this event? She asked, surprised. My father invites select clients to showcase the company's success and attract new investments. Several victims who don't yet realize they've been defrauded will be attending. Agent Reynolds saw the strategic value of my proposed timing. We'll need to coordinate with the state prosecutor's office. They've been building a separate case against your family's company for tax evasion. Over the next week, I worked with Agent Reynolds and Assistant District Attorney James Morello to prepare for what they were now calling Operation Family Business. My evidence was reviewed by forensic accountants and legal teams who confirmed what I had discovered. The Mitchell family had been operating a sophisticated fraud scheme for over 2 decades. With the legal side proceeding, I focused on the logistics of the reunion itself. The event was always held at the Mitchell estate, a property specifically designed to impress. I needed to ensure I could gain access despite my father's letter. I contacted Maria Gonzalez, our family's housekeeper of 15 years. Maria had always been kind to me, and I suspected she had seen enough of my family's true nature to be sympathetic. Miss Cassandra, she said when I met her at a park near her home. Your father has specifically told the staff you are not permitted on the property for the reunion. I understand, Maria. But you know my father and brother aren't good people, don't you? She looked down, then nodded slightly. I have seen things. The way they talk about clients when they leave the room. Papers shredded in the middle of the night. Your brother yelling at old Mr. Abernathy on the phone. They've been stealing from people like Mr. Abernathy. I have proof, and I'm working with the FBI to stop them. But I need to be at that reunion. Maria hesitated, then reached into her purse and handed me a key. The service entrance on the east side of the property. The security cameras don't cover it because your father thought it made the delivery people uncomfortable. I also needed to ensure that key victims would be present. I couldn't directly contact them without revealing my identity, so I worked with Jamie to create a plan. Jamie called several victims, posing as a Mitchell Properties assistant, to confirm their attendance at the reunion. This not only ensured they would be there, but also gave us a list of which victims to focus on. Mrs. Jenkins was at the top of my list. Over the past 3 years, she had lost her home and was now living in a small apartment. I wanted her to witness my father's downfall. As the reunion approached, I created backup plans for every scenario I could imagine. If I was stopped at the entrance, I would signal Agent Reynolds to proceed without me. If my father attempted to shut down the event when he saw me, I had prepared evidence packets to distribute to guests. If the electricity was cut in an attempt to halt my presentation, I had battery-powered equipment ready. I prepared a secure digital presentation with key evidence, organized for maximum impact. Bank statements showing client funds being diverted to personal accounts. Emails discussing how to manipulate elderly clients. Falsified investment reports. Voice recordings of Ryan discussing how they targeted easily confused old people with no financial sense. I also assembled physical evidence packets for key individuals, law enforcement, journalists I had contacted, and certain victims who deserved to see the full extent of the fraud. The night before the reunion, I couldn't sleep. I paced my apartment, rehearsing what I would say and anticipating every possible reaction. Jamie came over with takeout and tried to distract me with a movie, but my mind kept returning to what lay ahead. You can still back out, Jamie said. The FBI has the evidence. They don't need you to be there tomorrow. I need to be there, I replied. I need to look my father in the eye when it all comes crashing down. Just promise me you'll be careful. Men like your father and brother are dangerous when cornered. I nodded, appreciating Jamie's concern. Agent Reynolds will have a team in place. I'll be protected. It's not just physical danger I'm worried about, Jamie said quietly. This is going to be emotionally brutal. These people are still your family. No, I said firmly. They stopped being my family when they chose to prey on innocent people, when they valued money over human dignity. Tomorrow isn't about family. It's about justice. In the morning, I dressed carefully in a navy blue suit, professional, serious, and symbolically appropriate for bringing down the Mitchell empire. I packed my evidence, backup drives, and presentation equipment into a nondescript bag. As I prepared to leave my apartment, I took one last look at the Mitchell family photo on my bookshelf, taken when I was 16, all of us smiling as if we were the perfect family. I turned the frame face down. That illusion was about to be permanently shattered. I sent a text to Agent Reynolds. On my way. Operation Family Business is a go. Her response was immediate. Teams in position. Warrants secured. Good luck. With that, I left my apartment and headed to the Mitchell estate, ready to destroy everything my father had built on the foundation of lies, theft, and exploitation. The reunion was scheduled to begin at 2 o'clock. By 3, the Mitchell family legacy would be in ruins. The Mitchell estate looked particularly grand that Saturday afternoon. White event tents dotted the manicured lawn. Catering staff in crisp uniforms hurried about with trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres. Luxury cars lined the circular driveway, Bentleys, Mercedes, and the occasional Ferrari announcing the arrival of Boston's elite. I parked my modest Volvo a block away and approached the property from the east side, using the service entrance Key Maria had provided. My heart pounded as I slipped onto the grounds, keeping to the tree line to avoid being spotted too soon. Through gaps in the foliage, I could see guests mingling on the main lawn. My father stood at the center of a group of admirers, gesturing grandly as he told what was likely another embellished story of his business acumen. Ryan worked the crowd nearby, champagne in hand, oozing the charm that had helped lure so many victims. Amanda and her husband Peter stood by the fountain, she in a designer dress that probably cost more than Mrs. Jenkins' monthly rent. I spotted several victims among the guests. Mrs. Jenkins wore a dated but well-kept blue dress, likely her finest outfit. Mr. Abernathy, leaning on a cane, nodded politely as a waiter offered him champagne. The Lius, still unaware that their retirement fund had been decimated, smiled as they took photos of the elegant surroundings. Through my earpiece, I heard Agent Reynolds. We're in position. Agents at all exits.
State police on standby.
Proceed when ready. I took a deep breath and stepped out from the tree line, walking purposefully toward the main gathering. A server spotted me first, his eyes widening in recognition. He hurried toward the house, presumably to alert security. I kept walking. Amanda saw me next. She nearly dropped her champagne flute, grabbing Peter's arm and pointing in my direction. Peter's face darkened as he whispered something to her. Then Ryan noticed, his charming smile instantly transforming into a scowl. He began moving toward me, but stopped when my father raised a hand to halt him. Harold Mitchell broke away from his admirers and strode toward me, his public smile still fixed in place though his eyes blazed with fury. Cassandra, he said through clenched teeth when he reached me, I believe my letter was quite clear. This is a private event, and you are not welcome. Hello, Dad. I replied calmly. I got your message, but I thought it was important to be here today. Leave now, he hissed, keeping his voice low to avoid causing a scene. Security will escort you out if necessary. I don't think you want to make a scene, I said, especially considering what I'm about to share with your guests. His expression flickered, a momentary uncertainty crossing his features. Whatever game you're playing stops now. You're embarrassing yourself and this family. That's where you're wrong, Dad. You've embarrassed this family with decades of fraud. And today, everyone is going to learn exactly what kind of man Harold Mitchell really is. Before he could respond, I stepped around him and walked directly to the small stage that had been set up for his annual address. The AV equipment was already in place, another detail I had confirmed with Maria. Ryan attempted to intercept me, but I saw Agent Reynolds emerge from the crowd and subtly step into his path, showing him her badge. His face went pale. I reached the stage and tapped the microphone. The sound system was live. Conversations quieted as guests turned toward me, curious about the unscheduled speaker. "Good afternoon, everyone," I began, my voice steady despite my racing heart. For those who don't know me, I'm Cassandra Mitchell, Harold's daughter. I apologize for interrupting the festivities, but there's something you all need to know about Mitchell Properties and the family hosting you today. My father was now pushing through the crowd, his face contorted with rage. Two plainclothes FBI agents moved to block his path to the stage. "For 3 years," I continued, "I've been investigating systematic fraud within Mitchell Properties. Today, I'm here to share the truth with all of you, especially those who have entrusted your money to my father and brother." I connected my laptop to the projector, and financial statements appeared on the large screen behind me. The crowd murmured as they began to understand what they were seeing. These documents show how client funds were diverted to offshore accounts. "Mrs. Jenkins," I said, looking directly at the elderly woman whose face had gone ashen, "your life savings didn't disappear because of market downturns. They were stolen by my father and brother to fund their lavish lifestyle." Security guards started moving toward the stage, but Agent Reynolds stepped forward, her badge raised. "FBI, everyone stay where you are." More agents emerged from the crowd, taking strategic positions around the gathering. The security guards halted, looking uncertainly toward my father, who stood frozen in place. "Mr. and Mrs. Liu," I continued, my voice gaining strength, "the property development you invested in doesn't exist. It was a shell company created to steal your retirement fund." The couple clutched each other's hands, shock evident on their faces. Ryan suddenly lunged toward the AV equipment, attempting to disconnect my presentation. "She's lying," he shouted. "This is a personal vendetta. Cassandra has always been jealous of the family's success." Agent Peterson, a tall agent with a military bearing, stepped forward and restrained Ryan. "Ryan Mitchell, you are under arrest for wire fraud, securities fraud, and money laundering." The crowd gasped collectively. Phones came out as people began recording the unfolding drama. I continued my presentation, displaying email exchanges where my father and brother explicitly discussed defrauding clients. This email from Ryan Mitchell to Harold Mitchell, dated March 15, 2022, discusses, and I quote, "moving the Henderson assets before the old man realizes what's happening." Mr. Henderson, a man in his 70s who had been friends with my father for decades, staggered backward as if physically struck. A woman I assumed was his daughter steadied him, her face a mask of fury as she glared at my father. I played audio recordings of Ryan discussing client manipulation tactics with associates. His voice filled the tent. "These old people don't understand the paperwork. They just sign where I tell them to. By the time they realize something's wrong, if they ever do, the money's long gone." The evidence was damning and comprehensive. With each new revelation, guests edged away from my family members as if their crimes were contagious. My mother appeared from the house, her face pale and drawn. "Harold, what is happening?" she called out. "Ask your husband about the $40 million he's stolen from the people standing around you," I responded. "Ask him about the special accounts in the Caymans. Ask him about the falsified client statements." Agent Reynolds approached my father, warrant in hand. "Harold Mitchell, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit wire fraud, securities fraud, money laundering, and tax evasion." As she recited his rights, my father's public mask finally cracked completely. "This is ridiculous," he shouted. "Everything I did was just good business. Ryan, tell them." But Ryan was already in handcuffs, being led toward an unmarked car. In a desperate attempt to save himself, he called back, "It was all Dad's system. I just did what he taught me." The betrayal was instantaneous. My father's face purpled with rage. You ungrateful little. I built all of this for you. Peter, Amanda's husband, attempted to slip away unnoticed, but another agent intercepted him. Peter Westbrook, you're under arrest for aiding and abetting wire fraud and money laundering. Amanda screamed, running toward Peter as he was handcuffed. This is a mistake. Peter doesn't know anything about Mitchell Properties' finances. I clicked to the next slide, which showed emails between Peter and my father discussing how to launder money through Westbrook Investments. Amanda's desperate defense died on her lips as she read her husband's explicit instructions on how to hide stolen client funds. Throughout the chaos, I continued methodically presenting the evidence. The guests were riveted, unable to look away from the spectacular implosion of the Mitchell family dynasty. As my father was being led away, Mrs. Jenkins stepped forward, her frail body shaking with emotion. "I trusted you, Harold," she said, her voice cracking. "My Ralph worked 40 years to leave me that money. You promised to protect it." My father couldn't meet her eyes. For perhaps the first time in his life, Harold Mitchell had no smooth response, no charming deflection. Outside the property gates, news vans had begun to arrive, tipped anonymously about a major arrest at the Mitchell estate. Camera crews captured footage of Boston's elite financier being placed in an FBI vehicle. My mother, who had remained frozen in shock, finally approached me as I stepped down from the stage. "How could you do this to your family?" she whispered. "How could you do this to innocent people who trusted you?" I countered. "Did you think I wouldn't find out? Or did you just think I would be willing to ignore it like you did?" "You don't understand what it takes to build something like this," she said, gesturing around us. "Your father did what was necessary. Stealing from elderly people was necessary. Destroying lives for your luxury was necessary." I shook my head in disbelief.
"I found your emails, Mom. You knew everything."
Agent Reynolds approached. "Mrs. Mitchell, we have some questions regarding your involvement. I'd appreciate if you'd come with me." As my mother was led away for questioning, Amanda stormed up to me, tears streaming down her face. "You've destroyed everything. Are you happy now?" "I didn't destroy anything, Amanda. Dad and Ryan did that when they decided to build our family fortune by stealing from vulnerable people."
"You always thought you were better than us," she spat.
Little Miss Perfect with her ethical career and her moral high ground. "I never wanted to be better than you," I said quietly. "I just wanted our family to be good people." Was that really too much to ask? Amanda's response died on her lips as she watched her husband being placed in a police car. The reality of her new situation seemed to dawn on her suddenly. Her designer lifestyle, her social standing, her future, all of it built on fraud and now crumbling before her eyes. "What am I supposed to do now?" she asked, her voice small and lost. For the first time that day, I felt a flicker of sympathy. Amanda had been raised in this corrupt environment, taught that appearance was everything and ethics were flexible. "You start over," I said. "And this time, build something real." The next hour was a blur of statements, evidence handovers, and answering questions from authorities. Guests departed rapidly, eager to distance themselves from the scandal. Some victims stayed, speaking with agents about their stolen funds and the possibility of restitution. By sunset, the magnificent Mitchell estate stood nearly empty. The white tents that had been erected for celebration now fluttered in the evening breeze like surrender flags. Abandoned champagne glasses and half-eaten canapes littered the tables. I stood on the lawn where I had played as a child, where I had sought my father's approval, where I had once believed in the Mitchell family legacy. Now I was the only Mitchell not in custody or being questioned. Jamie found me there as twilight descended. "You did it," she said, putting an arm around my shoulders. "It's over." I nodded, emotionally exhausted. "Let's go home." As we walked away from the estate, I didn't look back. The Mitchell family, as I had known it, ceased to exist that day. In its place would be truth, accountability, and perhaps eventually, justice for those who had been harmed. The reunion had indeed happened, just not in the way my family had planned. We had been reunited with the consequences of our actions, with the truth behind our wealth, and with the moral debt that had accrued over decades of deception. 6 months after the Mitchell family reunion turned federal raid, I sat in my new apartment in Cambridge, watching the final news report about my family's case. The anchor's voice was measured as she delivered the outcome of the most high-profile financial fraud case in recent Boston history. Harold Mitchell, founder of Mitchell Properties, was sentenced today to 15 years in federal prison after pleading guilty to multiple counts of wire fraud, securities fraud, and money laundering. His son, Ryan Mitchell, received a 12-year sentence for his role in the family's decades-long fraud scheme. Peter Westbrook, who aided in laundering funds through his investment firm, will serve 8 years. The screen showed my father and brother being led into the courthouse, both in suits but notably without the confidence that had once defined them. They looked smaller somehow, diminished by the exposure of their true nature. Eleanor Mitchell avoided jail time through a plea agreement requiring her to forfeit all assets and cooperate with prosecutors. The Mitchell family's $40 million fraud targeted primarily elderly and financially vulnerable clients, many of whom lost their life savings. The report cut to an interview with Mrs. Jenkins, who looked healthier than when I'd last seen her. "I've moved back into my home," she said, smiling slightly. "The restitution fund has returned most of what was taken from me. I can pay my heating bills again." I turned off the television, feeling a complex mix of emotions. The justice I had sought had been delivered, but there was no real joy in watching my family's public downfall, only a somber satisfaction that the truth had prevailed. My own life had transformed dramatically. After the arrests, I had resigned from my position at Delaney Financial Forensics and taken a job teaching forensic accounting at a local university. The Mitchell scandal had made me something of a minor celebrity in financial circles, with offers to write a book and speak at conferences about detecting family-based fraud schemes. I had declined most of these opportunities, preferring to focus on helping the victims rebuild. The court had appointed me as a consultant to the restitution fund, using my knowledge of the fraud to help track down and recover as much money as possible. It was fulfilling work, helping repair at least some of the damage my family had caused. My new apartment was nothing like the Mitchell mansion, a modest 2-bedroom in a quiet neighborhood, furnished simply but comfortably. No ostentatious displays of wealth, no original artwork or designer furniture. Just a clean, honest space that was truly mine. Jamie had been my rock throughout the aftermath, helping me navigate the publicity and emotional turmoil. Our friendship had deepened through the ordeal, with hints of something more developing between us. We were taking it slowly, both aware of how the intensity of the past year might be affecting our feelings. "Ready for visitors?" Jamie asked, poking her head into the living room. She had been helping me prepare for a small gathering. My first attempt at hosting since the scandal broke. "As ready as I'll ever be," I replied, straightening a picture frame on the bookshelf, a new photo of Jamie and me at a Red Sox game, replacing the old Mitchell family portrait. The aftermath of the case had brought unexpected allies. Several former Mitchell Properties employees had reached out to thank me for stopping the fraud, admitting they had suspected wrongdoing but had been too afraid to speak up. Some of the victims had become friends, particularly Mrs. Jenkins, who now joined me for coffee every other Sunday. Even more surprisingly, my cousin Derek, the one who had sent the anonymous tip, had reconnected with me. "I tried to warn people about Uncle Harold years ago," he told me over lunch. "Nobody would listen. You were braver than I was, Cassandra. You actually did something about it." Amanda had contacted me only once since the sentencing, sending a brief email. "I'm filing for divorce. Moving to Chicago to stay with my college roommate. Don't know who I am without the Mitchell name and money. Not sure I want to know." I had responded with an offer to talk if she ever felt ready, but hadn't heard back. Of all my family members, Amanda was the one I held the most hope for. She had been a product of our toxic family environment, but perhaps without my father's influence, she might find her own path. My mother had moved to a small apartment in Florida, living on the modest allowance permitted by her plea agreement. She had sent several letters that I left unopened on my desk, unable yet to confront the complex emotions they would inevitably trigger. Perhaps someday I would be ready to read them, but not yet. The doorbell rang, announcing my first guest. I opened the door to find Mrs. Jenkins, holding a homemade apple pie. "I remember you mentioning it was your favorite," she said, handing me the pie. "My mother's recipe." More guests arrived: Jamie's sister Leah, my new colleagues from the university, Derek and his wife, and several other victims who had become unexpected friends through the restitution process. We were an unusual gathering, bound together by a shared experience of betrayal and recovery. As we settled in the living room with drinks and Mrs. Jenkins' pie, conversation flowed naturally. No one mentioned the Mitchell scandal directly, but its presence lingered in the unspoken understanding among us, the knowledge that sometimes the hardest right choice is standing against your own family when they've chosen a wrong path. Later that evening, after most guests had departed, I checked my phone to find an unexpected email. It was from my father, sent through the prison email system. The subject line read simply, "Why?" I showed it to Jamie, who was helping me clean up. "Are you going to answer him?" she asked. "I don't think he would understand," I replied. "He's still looking for some complicated explanation, some revenge motive or personal grudge. He can't comprehend that it was simply about right and wrong." I deleted the email, without opening it. Whatever my father wanted to say, I wasn't interested in his justifications or accusations. I had spent my entire life seeking his approval, and now I finally understood that it was never worth having. As Jamie and I finished washing the dishes, the doorbell rang again. It was late for visitors, nearly 10 o'clock. I opened the door to find Amanda standing there, looking nothing like the polished, perfect daughter I remembered. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, her face free of makeup, wearing jeans and a sweater instead of her usual designer outfits. "I was in town," she said awkwardly. "I saw the light on and thought." She trailed off, seemingly unsure of what she had thought. "Would you like to come in?" I asked after a moment of surprised silence. Amanda nodded, stepping hesitantly into my apartment. She glanced around, taking in the modest furnishings, so different from the luxury she had grown accustomed to. "It's nice," she said, sounding genuinely surprised. "It feels like a home." "It is a home," I replied. "Just a different kind than we grew up in." Amanda noticed the remains of the gathering. The coffee cups, the half-eaten pie, the board games still set up on the coffee table. "You had people over?" "Just some friends," I said. "Would you like some pie?" "Mrs. Jenkins made it." Amanda's eyes widened slightly at the mention of one of our father's victims, but she nodded. "I'd like that." As I cut a slice of pie, Amanda pulled a small package from her purse and placed it on the counter. "I found this when I was packing up my things. I thought you might want it." I unwrapped the package to find a faded photograph in a simple frame, me at about 8 years old, sitting on our grandfather's lap. I was missing my front teeth and grinning widely. It was before the Mitchell wealth had exploded, before the fraud began in earnest, when we were just a normal family. "Thank you," I said quietly, unexpectedly moved by the gesture. "I'm trying to figure out who I am," Amanda said, accepting the plate of pie. "Without Dad's money, without the Mitchell name opening doors. It's harder than I thought it would be." "I know," I replied, "but it's worth it, finding out who you really are." She looked at me with new eyes, perhaps seeing me clearly for the first time. "Do you think, could we maybe get coffee sometime? When I'm back in town?" It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. It wasn't even reconciliation. But it was a small opening, a tiny crack in the wall that had divided us for so long. "I'd like that," I said. As Amanda left an hour later, I stood in the doorway watching her walk to her car, not a luxury vehicle anymore, just a practical sedan. She turned and gave a small wave before driving away. I closed the door, leaning against it as I considered the strange path my life had taken. I had lost my family of origin but gained a chosen family of honest connections. I had lost financial privilege but gained the peace of ethical certainty. I had lost the Mitchell legacy but found myself. Sometimes, understood means more than simple comprehension. Sometimes it means accepting the end of one chapter and embracing the beginning of another. My father's letter had been intended to punish me, to exclude me from the family I had once desperately wanted to please. Instead, it had freed me to build something new, something true, something entirely my own. I wonder if you've ever had to make a choice between family loyalty and doing what's right? It's never easy, is it? If my story resonated with you in any way, I'd love to hear about your experiences in the comments. Sometimes the hardest decisions lead to the most authentic lives. If you found value in my journey from family outcast to finding my own integrity, please consider subscribing and sharing this video with someone who might need to hear that it's okay to choose truth, even when it costs you relationships. Thank you for listening to my family story, the bad parts, and the healing that came after. Remember, sometimes the family we choose becomes more important than the family we're born into. I'll see you in the next video with another story of finding strength through life's most challenging moments.